so you guys should go to 8A, Perspectives and Narratives. Then you're going to click Subunit 2, Get Started. You're going to scroll down to Lesson 9, Experiments and Revision, The Power of Dialogue. So the overview of today is we are going to wrap up the Get Started unit, and we are going to do a third revision assignment. This is a small writing experiment that asks you to add just a few more sentences to what you've already written. So you guys are going to go to Activity 1. You're going to click this purple text, go to your vocab app, and you guys are going to work for 5 minutes. So pause this video, set a timer for 5 minutes, and when you've worked on your vocab for 5 minutes, you can come back. When you guys are done, you're going to click Next Activity. And so in our next lesson, we'll begin reading Going Solo, which was the book we've looked into a little over the last few lessons. As we do, we'll shift from writing about our own experiences to reading what Roald Dahl wrote about his. As we explore Dahl's memoir, I want us to keep an eye on how Dahl is using all those writing tools we've been learning about. We'll see Dahl using some of the same writing techniques that we've been practicing, such as focusing deeply on a single moment instead of writing about a little of everything, balancing what we tell with what we show, and turning weak verbs into strong ones that are more precise and vivid. Today, we'll also look at another tool that writers use to make their writing more powerful: dialogue. Dialogue is the part of a book when the characters speak to each other. Usually the writer marks dialogue by putting quotation marks around the words and the characters. In England, writers use single quotation marks. Many of you may also read books where writers use dashes. Here's a passage of dialogue from Going Solo that we read a few lessons ago. It says, "Do you always eat an orange like that?" I said. "Of course." "May I ask why?" "I never touch anything I eat with my fingers," she said. So here we can see, like they said in England, they only use one quotation mark. But this is what the person is saying. This is dialogue. "Do you always eat an orange like that?" That is dialogue. And so I'm going to play this for you guys, and you guys are going to read along as this plays.
She was eating an orange at the time, and I noticed suddenly that she was not eating it in the normal way. In the first place, she had speared it from the fruit bowl with her fork instead of taking it in her fingers. And now, with knife and fork, she was making a series of neat incisions in the skin all around the orange. Then, very delicately, using the points of her knife and fork, she peeled the skin away in 8 separate pieces, leaving the bare fruit beautifully exposed. Still using knife and fork, she separated the juicy segments and began to eat them slowly, one by one with her fork. "Do you always eat an orange like that?" I said. "Of course." "May I ask why?" "I never touch anything I eat with my fingers," she said. "Good Lord, don't you really?" "Never. I haven't since I was 22. "Is there a reason for that?" I asked her. "Of course there's a reason. Fingers are filthy." "But you wash your hands." "I don't sterilize them," Miss Trefusis said. "Nor do you. They're full of bugs." "Disgusting, dirty things, fingers. Just think what you do with them." I sat there going through the things I did with my fingers. "Doesn't bear thinking about, does it?" Miss Trefusis said. "Fingers are just implements. They are the gardening implements of the body, the shovels and the forks. You push them into everything." "We seem to survive," I said. "Not for long you won't," she said darkly. I watched her eating her orange, spearing the little boats one after the other with her fork. I could have told her that the fork wasn't sterilized either, but I kept quiet. "Toes are even worse," she said suddenly. "I beg your pardon?" "They're the worst of all," she said. "What's wrong with toes?" "They are the nastiest part of the human body," she announced vehemently. "Worse than fingers?" There's no comparison, she snapped. Fingers are foul and filthy, but toes are reptilian and viperish. I don't wish to talk about them.
All right. Any of these blue words, if you guys don't know what they mean, you can click on them and it'll give you a definition. So go ahead and click next. So Dahl wraps up the scene by describing how both Major Griffiths and Mr. Fusus were completely dotty. In this context, Dahl uses dotty to mean eccentric or a little crazy. You guys are going to highlight 3 phrases that show you how dotty or crazy Mr. Fusus is. In a different color, you're going to highlight 2 phrases that show you how Roald reacts to Mr. Fusus. And then from what you see of how Roald reacts to Mr. Fusus, what do you think about how he feels about her? And an example of some highlighting that you guys might do. So you might highlight, "We seem to survive," I said, and then you can leave a note. And even when Mr. Fusus is going off the deep end, Roald doesn't treat her like she's crazy. He responds very mildly. He just listens and doesn't really make fun of her. But his mild reactions do show off just how kooky she is. And this blue text, and also I could have told her that the fork wasn't sterilized either, but I kept quiet. Both of those go with this note. "Not for long you won't," she said darkly, and she announced vehemently. Mr. Fusus, she shares these feelings with a great deal of energy. These descriptors that follow dialogue are called speech tags. And then in green, toes are reptilian and viperish. Mr. Fusus has very strong feelings about how nasty toes are. So you guys can highlight things and then use them to help you make notes about the story, what's going on. In order to highlight text, what you guys are going to do is you'll drag your mouse over it, then highlight a color. If you would like to leave a note, you just click on it again and you can leave a note. Then your note will show up there. You can click on it and see it later. If you want to change the color of your highlighted text, you'll have to highlight it first in whatever was the last color that you used, and then you'll click it again and you can change the color. So pause the video here, highlight 3 phrases that show you how crazy Mr. Fusus is. In a different color, highlight 2 phrases that show you how Roald reacts to Mr. Fusus. And then from what you see of how Roald reacts to Mr. Fusus, so what you highlighted in this color, what do you think about how he feels about her? And when you have answered those, you can come back and unpause this video. So take another look at the scene between Dahl and Mr. Fusus. This time, take a look at how Dahl is using the different writing skills we've been practicing in our own writing. So you're going to highlight your favorite short example of, and so I could say I want to highlight dialogue, and it says that I should highlight that in red, so I'm going to make sure that that is red. And then I'm going to go find a place where they are showing, and that's going to be in orange. A place where they tell is going to be in yellow. An action piece is going to be in green, and strong verbs are going to be in blue. You only need to highlight one example of each, but if you would like to highlight more than one, you can do that. Once you have done that, make sure that you click hand in down at the bottom. So pause this video here, do that, and then come back and unpause. So for activity 4, you guys are going to add dialogue to a familiar story to learn more about how powerfully dialogue can convey character. So you guys have all read Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was loved by everyone who knew her, but most of all by her grandmother, who gave her a beautiful cape of red wool, which suited her so well she never wore anything else. It wasn't long before everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red's mother gave her a basket of food to deliver to her sick grandmother, who lived by herself deep in the forest. Before she left, Little Red's mother warned her to follow the path and not waste time wandering. Little Red promised she would do just as she was told and set off into the woods. But she hadn't gone very far before Little Red noticed how pretty the flowers were that grew along the river that rambled away from the path. So your task is you're going to add 3 lines of dialogue to help us understand what Little Red feels in this scene. And again, remember that dialogue is what someone says. And when you're writing with dialogue, you need to have quotation marks that go around what the person is saying. This dialogue can be spoken by Little Red, Little Red's mother, or a character Little Red encounters after she leaves the house. So you are going to pause here, and once you have added 3 lines of dialogue, then you can come back and unpause this video. When you're done with that, make sure that you click Hand In. Activity 5, you guys are going to be revising something that you wrote in Lesson 4. So your original writing prompt, you guys were writing about one awful moment from a recent day at school, or one great moment. At this point in time, you should be able to see comments that your teacher left for you. So take a minute to read those comments. There is a spot that is marked revision assignment or a general comment that is left, and this is where you're going to add precise details to help the reader picture this moment more clearly. You're going to write 3 or 4 more sentences to focus on just this highlighted moment using precise details. And our precise details we've also been calling vivid details. Some examples that you can use sensory details, how something looks, sounds, smells, tastes, or feels like. You can add action, what someone or something does. Dialogue, including internal, which internal dialogue is what someone is thinking. We also just talked about using strong verbs, so you can add strong verbs into your writing to make it more powerful. You're going to skip a line and write your new sentences below your original response. So your original response will show up here. You guys will skip a couple lines and then write your new response down at the bottom. When you're done with that, you can come back and unpause this video. Make sure that when you're done, you click Hand In. You guys are going to skip activity 6 because we did not do lesson 7. You guys are going to skip activity 7 because we don't have anyone to share with. Then your solo assignment today is to read for 20 minutes. You guys should already be reading 60 minutes outside of English class. You guys should already have an independent choice read book. You're going to tell us what you read, the title and the author. Choose, are you glad that you spent the time reading it, or do you wish that you could have your time back? How many minutes did you spend reading? And then roughly how many times were you interrupted? Once you are done with that, go ahead and click Hand In, and that is your last lesson for the day. I hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your day.